Just to do a quick shameless plug before I get on with the video, if you want to support the channel and you want to check out some hoodies that you potentially like the look of, such as this one, you can check the link in the description for the KL store. Have a look on there, see what you like, whatever takes your fancy. If you want any custom colours, maybe in the team of your choosing, let's say you like the Sea Eagles, for example, you want the specific colours for the Sea Eagles on one of the designs, you can send me a direct message via Twitter, which is also linked in the description down below. Just say these are the colours you want. I can send you a mock-up and it'll be no extra cost. So there's my shameless plug. Now for the video. So hello everyone, my name is Rob, welcome to Kinetic Rugby League. In this video I'll be giving you my NRL round 25 tips and predictions. Now things have been going pretty well recently, pretty damn well. So in the last 3 videos I've done, so there's the Challenge Cup plus the single Super League game that was on, both correct. The 8 games from last week in the NRL, all correct. And the 6 games from the Super League the week prior, all correct. So over the last 16 games, all 16 have been correct. And the margins last week, I only got 1 out of 8. So not brilliant, and that was the Broncos against the Eels. But we strive just for another 8 out of 8 this week, and hopefully we'll pull another one out of the bag. So let's get started. So kicking things off, we have the North Queensland Cowboys versus the Cronulla Sharks, and starting with the Cowboys, they currently sit in 9th place on the ladder. They've won 3 in the last 5. Their home record is 8 wins and 3 losses. They're also on a bye last time out. Now this week they'll be hosting from the Queensland Country Bank Stadium in Townsville. Now take a look at the squad that they've currently announced so far. In the backs it includes Drinkwater, Felt, Taulagi, Hiku, Valame, Dearden and Townsend. In the forwards it includes McLean, Robson, Taumalolo, Leilua, Nanai and Cotter. On the bench is currently Granville, Hess, Lukey and Neem. Now looking at percentage stats for the Cowboys, they have a 52% win rate, 79% completion rate and a tackle efficiency of 85.8%. Moving on to the Sharks, they currently sit in 5th place on the ladder. They've won 2 in the last 5 and their away record is 6 wins and 4 losses. They also won last time out against the Titans. Looking at the squad that they've initially announced, in the backs it includes Tracy, Katoa, Ramian, Talakai, Molotalo, Trindle and Hines. In the forwards it includes Rudolph, Brayley, Hamlin Ueli, Nikora, Graham and McInnes. I've been calling him McKines the last couple of weeks. McInnes, I've learned my lessons. On the bench it includes Williams, Hunt, Hazelton and Moylan. Looking at percentage stats for the Sharks, it includes a 57% win rate, 76% completion rate and a tackle efficiency of 87.3%. So right now the Cowboys are on a 2-game loss streak and the Sharks are on a 2-game win streak. It was looking really bad for the Sharks a few weeks ago, really bad, but they've turned it around. We know that they're a decent team. I was assuming, I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, that they'd be in free fall basically, but they've not done that. They turned things around very quickly. The Cowboys have struggled the past couple of weeks. That does include a tough game against the Broncos, of course. It also included a loss against the Titans, which, the Sharks battered. So I do think that a close game is likely here. Now, I do think that based on the full squads being available for both teams, except for, I guess, Matt Moylan still being dropped. He's on the bench, but still being dropped for Braden Trindle, that the Cowboys are in the better position here. So maybe they have a bit less sting out of their team with, Taulagi having to play at centre instead of on the wing usually, but Cal Felt doing a cracking job so far on the left-hand side. Taulagi's still doing a fine job at centre. So I think they are missing Holmes, and he is going to continue to be a big miss for as long as he's out. But as soon as they get him back in, I think they'll be firing at 100%. I think they're still going to be at about 90%. The Sharks are still a little bit, up and down. They're not perfect. They allow some heavy points in from time to time, but they do know how to score points as well. So I don't think it's going to be an astronomical scoreline. I think it's going to be fairly close, but I think the Cowboys have enough in them to keep it going and to sort of really fight for that top 8 spot. The 9th place right now, looking at how they were doing at the start of the season, they were nowhere near it. Wasn't going to happen, but we see what they have in their squad. We see how they've turned things around, and against the Sharks team that I still don't fully trust just yet, I think the Cowboys are in the best position to win this one. So I'm going to take the Cowboys to win 1 to 12 points. Next up, we have the New Zealand Warriors versus the Manly Seagulls, and starting with the Warriors, they currently sit in 3rd place on the ladder. They've won 5 in the last 5, and their home record is 6 wins and 4 losses. They also won last time out against the Tigers. This week, they'll be hosting from the Daniel Anderson Stadium in Auckland, and looking at the squad that they've currently announced so far, in the backs includes Nickel Klokstad, Watene Zelezniak, Berry, Pompey, Montoya, Metcalf and Johnson. In the forwards, it includes Fanua Blake, Egan, Afoa, Ford, Niokore and Harris. On the bench, it includes Walker, Tavega, Sirinen and Curran. Looking at percentage stats for the Warriors, it includes a 67% win rate, 78% completion rate and a tackle efficiency of 88.2%. Moving on to the Seagulls, they currently sit in 12th place on the ladder. They've won 2 in the last 5. Their away record is 4 wins and 6 losses. They also lost last time out against the Panthers. Looking at the squad that they've announced so far, in the backs, it includes Garrick, Saab, Kula, Harper, Tauimalo Vega, Schuster and Cherry Evans. In the forwards, it includes Sipley, Croker, Kepi, Olakuatu, Tuilagi and Jake Trebojevic. On the bench, it includes Arthur, Mattison, Woods and Bullimore. Looking at percentage stats for the Seagulls, it includes a 43% win rate, 77% completion rate and a tackle efficiency of 87.3%. So the Seagulls last week against the Panthers weren't too bad. There's, different points, different nuances to go over, but the Seagulls put in an admirable effort against the Panthers. Sounds bad, but to only lose by 12. I think a lot of us thought it'd be 13 plus. Panthers would run away with it. And the Panthers could have done, but they weren't really at their best, to be honest. But what I liked about the Seagulls is that for the first 10, 15, 20 minutes, they really went at the Panthers. And there was a couple times they spread the ball early in the tackle count and, deep inside their own half, maybe on the 20 or the 30, and they gained some really good meters. And they spread the ball out wide, got some clean space, made it easily into the second half, put themselves in good field position to finish out the sets. It didn't really work out too well too many times, but they at least had a go, and that's what I liked about the Seagulls last week, coming off the back of a loss against the Roosters, which I think they should have been more competitive in. I thought, they're not getting anywhere near, but they made it a decent contest for the first half. I think, the interception kind of took the wind out of them, but they took the lead eventually. So the Seagulls had enough in them to really challenge the Panthers for a long portion of this game. And then looking at the Warriors, I think they should have been a lot more comfortable against the Tigers. And I've been mentioning week in, week out at this point, the Tigers, yes, they've really been fighting, but they've not been getting those wins. I thought that the Warriors would be okay. The Tigers came up against 2 teams previously that were a little bit off, where they had been vulnerable defensively, so I thought the Tigers could be closer for that reason. But against the Warriors, who have been clean, the Warriors really should be running away with it, but they didn't. And it was a strong effort from the Tigers in the end, but this isn't about the Tigers. The Warriors, I think, at this point in the season now, firmly a top 8 team. Mathematically, I don't know if they're safe or not, but even if they're not fully safe yet, I'd have no doubts that they're easily just going to be in the top 8. Whether they retain a top 4 position, I think for me is still set in stone. I think the top 4 for me is set, personally, which includes the Panthers, Broncos, Warriors and Storm. But at this point now, the Warriors need to be looking at, yes, they're getting the wins, but they need to be looking at dominating these games. This is a team that, yes, they're playing against the Seagulls, which is a team that is still trying to fight, but this is a game that the Warriors need to put in a statement win, and they need to kind of build up this reputation before getting finals footy, basically. It's just my personal opinion. As long as they're getting the wins, that's the bare minimum is to win the games. But I think from this point on, these have got to be statement wins from the Warriors. So with that being said, I'm going to go with the Warriors to win, 13 plus. Next up, we have the Parramatta Eels versus the Sydney Roosters, and starting with the Eels, they currently sit in 10th place on the ladder. They've won 2 in the last 5, and their home record is 7 wins and 4 losses. They also lost last time out against the Broncos. This week, they'll be hosting from the CommBank Stadium in Sydney. Looking at the squad that they've initially announced so far, the backs include Gutherson, Sivo, Penasini, Simonson, Russell, Assey, and Brown. In the forwards, they have Campbell Gillard, Lussick, Barlow, Hopgood, Cartwright, and Offengawi. On the bench, it includes Moretti, Mattison, Grigg, and Hands. Looking at percentage stats for the Eels, it includes a 50% win rate, 75% completion rate, and a tackle efficiency of 86.8%. Moving on to the Roosters, they currently sit in 11th place on the ladder. They've won 3 in the last 5, and their away record is 3 wins and 7 losses. They also won last time out against the Dolphins. Looking at the squad that they've announced for this week, in the backs it includes Tedesco, Tupou, Billy Smith, Manu, Suwali, Kiri, and Hutchison. In the forwards, it includes Warrior Hargreaves, Brandon Smith, Collins, Wong, Butcher, and Radley. On the bench, it includes Sandon Smith, Baker, May, and Crichton. Looking at percentage stats for the Roosters, it includes a 48% win rate, 74% completion rate, and a tackle efficiency of 87.3%. Now, the big name missing for the Eels is, of course, Mitchell Moses. He's going to be a huge miss. But, looking at what the Eels do have, they have reliable creative players in Gutherson, of course. Mike Acevo is a top finisher, dangerous player on the wing. He's now back in. Penasini, I think he's incredible. I think he's very underrated. One of the most underrated centres in the league, actually. He's only 20 years of age. There are a few players a couple of years older. I think like Crichton, he's rated, of course, higher than Penasini. But I think he's an exceptional player. I really do. So he's in there. Simonson's on the other centre, or in the other centre position. You've got Russell on the wing. Assey has moved from centre last week, I believe, into the halves. Dylan Brown playing the number 7 role. So in the backs, it's not exactly what they want, but it's it's the best they're going to get. And I do think Assey, when he's played in the halves, has put in a decent performance. I've doubted him a couple times, and in times where he was paired with Moses in the halves, and I think the Eels won a couple of those when I went against them. In the forwards, it's nice to have Campbell Gillard back. He's a huge player for them. So the Eels, it's not ideal without Moses. They can still put in a good shift, but moving on to the Roosters, last week I didn't give them the 13 plus over the Dolphins because I said that I don't trust them yet. Even though the Dolphins, they picked up a sin bin, and that does, of course, contribute to the result, I do now trust the Roosters. I think with Drew Hutchison at 7, you can, put a little question mark over that one, because, is he the guy at number 7, especially to try and win him a premiership if they're pushing for top 8. Who knows? But I did mention last week, he's got plenty of experience in different positions, in the backs, in the forwards. He's a reliable player, plenty of experience, and, he had a cracking performance last week. Manu playing his usual position, right centre, looks so much better there. So many rounds wasted with him at number 6. Wasted time. Tedesco playing better, more consistent, good rugby in the number 1 role. And, I don't know, Kiri, running things, controlling things, creating opportunities. He's always a class act. And in the forwards, he looked pretty strong. And Smith at left centre, I really like him there. I really do. So things are kind of clicking for the Roosters. They'll be full of confidence. Big win against the Seagulls and then against the Dolphins. I do now trust the Roosters because they've got things firing. They've worked things out. Eels are missing Moses, so the kicking game isn't going to be as effective. So for me, the Roosters are now capable of winning these games comfortably. So I'm going to go with the Roosters to win, 13 plus. Next up, we have the West Tigers versus the Dolphins, and starting with the Tigers, who currently sit in 17th place on the ladder. They've won 0 in the last 5, and their home record is 2 wins and 9 losses. He also lost last time out against the Warriors. This week, they'll be hosting from the CommBank Stadium in Sydney as well. Looking at the squad that they've announced so far for this week, in the backs it includes Bula, Norfoluma, Toa, Kapoa, Tupou, Laurie and Brooks. In the forwards it includes Utokomanu, Coruscant, Clement, Papali'i, Bateman and Pauly. On the bench is Simpkin, Seyfarth, Twal and Bloor. Looking at percentage stats for the Tigers, it includes a 14% win rate, 74% completion rate and a tackle efficiency of 88.5%. Moving on to the Dolphins, who currently sit in 14th place on the ladder. They've won 1 in the last 5, and their away record is 4 wins and 7 losses. They also lost last time out against the Roosters. Now looking at the squad that they've announced for this week, in the backs it includes Nikorima, Isako, Bostock, Jennings, Neo, Katoa and O'Sullivan. In the forwards they have Jesse Bromwich, Graham, Sasa, Kafusi, Aitken and Nichols. On the bench it includes Collins, Kurt, Milford and Wallace. Looking at percentage stats for the Dolphins, it includes a 38% win rate, 79% completion rate, and a tackle efficiency of 86.8%. So, the mighty Tigers have a perfect opportunity to come away with a win, finally, after all this time. Now, looking at the players that are out for the Dolphins, it includes Lemuelu, Tabai Fidel, Marshall King, Kenneth Bromwich, and Stone. My God. This is a perfect opportunity for the Tigers. Now, I've been saying the same thing for the last couple of weeks now. The Tigers have been fighting, really fighting, and they've been putting in some decent-ish performances to at least fight teams, come close, put up a good handful of points against the Dolphins. Now, keep in mind, they still have Nikorima at fullback, who is reliable. He's done fine. They've got Katoa at 6, O'Sullivan at 7. I trust those guys, and the spine. They're missing Marshall King, who's a huge miss. Tabai Fidel is not available. He's a huge miss. And who else? I mean, Milford is still in the squad. So there are still players who are part of the spine for the Dolphins that can, that can pull out a win here. But for me, there's just enough key players missing for the Dolphins. And the Tigers are due a win at this point. They're so ready for a win. I think this could be it. I genuinely think this could be it for the Tigers. Now, I'm not looking at any 13-plus kind of deal here. But I think a strong win is likely. I don't know about a narrow one, like a 2-point or a 4-point. But for me, I'm looking at an 8-point gap here. Because I think... I don't know. For me, there's not much else to say other than I think the Tigers are due a win at this point. Bula has been outstanding for them. Really great job as a young player, coming in, kind of thrown into things, and he's performed really well. Laurie in the number 6 role has done a pretty damn good job as well. And the last couple of weeks since Brooks has been back, and even the few weeks before his injury, he was playing exceptionally well. So, with Bula, Laurie, Brooks, and Coruscant, who we know is a class act at number 9, the spine there for the Tigers is strong enough. They've had the same consistent squad for the last couple of weeks as well, which has been really helpful. I think it's about time the Tigers took a win here. So, I'm going to go with the Tigers to win 1 to 12 points. Next up, we have the Gold Coast Titans versus the Penrith Panthers, and starting with the Titans, they currently sit in 13th place on the ladder. They've won 1 in the last 5, and their home record is 5 wins and 5 losses. They also lost to the Sharks last time out. They'll be hosting from the Seabus Super Stadium on the Gold Coast this week. Looking at the squad that they've initially announced, it includes, in the backs, Kinney, Con Pereira, Kelly, Shop, Sammy, Campbell and Weaver. In the forwards, it includes Fotuaika, Randall, Jolliffe, Fafita, Haas and Tino Fa'asu Malawi. On the bench it includes Leeming, Leo, Stimson and Alec. Looking at percentage stats for the Gold Coast, it includes a 38% win rate, 79% completion rate and a tackle efficiency of 85.8%. Moving on to the Panthers, who currently sit in first place on the ladder. They've won 5 in the last 5. Their away record is 8 wins and 3 losses. They also won last time out against the Seagulls. Looking at the squad that they've announced for this week, in the backs it includes Edwards, Taruva, Peachy, Crichton, Toto, Luai and Cleary. In the forwards they have Leota, Kenny, Fisher-Harris, Sorensen, Martin and Yo. On the bench they have Luke, Smith, Eisenhuth and Salmon. Looking at percentage stats for the Panthers, it includes a 76% win rate, 82% completion rate, and a tackle efficiency of 87.6%. So there's a couple of names that I've obviously not mentioned there for the Titans. And the big names, of course, include Foran, Boyd, and Brimson, which is essentially near enough the entire Titans spine. Verrills is already out for the season, so that's awful for them. Now, Brimson is in the reserves, so there's always the possibility that he comes into the first team, depending on what happens. It's possible. Now, the forwards are going to be extremely important for the Titans here because they can't just compete with the Panthers. They need to dominate the Panthers, which is extremely difficult to do when Leota, Fisher-Harris, Sorensen, Martin and Yeo is included in that. You're not going to dominate them, but if the Titans want to get one over on the Panthers this week, they need to dominate in the forwards because the spine is not going to be strong enough to do it. It's not going to happen. I love Jaden Campbell. Jesus Christ. Jaden Campbell, but he's not going to take over this game. If it was someone lower down in the ladder, maybe, but against a strong defensive team like the Panthers, he's not going to take over this game. He's going to have a huge influence, but with Tom Weaver playing at 7, Kinney at number 1, Verrill's out for the season, Chris Randall at 9 is fine, and Cruz Leeming I think is also fine. It's just a real tough situation for the Titans to be in. And no one expects them to win, but as a group, they'll of course want to win, and Titans fans still want them to win, obviously. But in order to do that, the forwards need to dominate. Absolutely dominate, which they can do, you know, with Fotuaika, Jolliffe, David Fafita, Haas, and Tino Fa'asuamaleaui. They absolutely can if they're firing on all cylinders. But they need to dominate in the forwards to give players like Weaver as much time as possible to do what he needs to do. Jaden Campbell can do whatever he wants to do, and I trust him to, you know, break the line, create chances, scare the Panthers defense from time to time, but this is going to be a real tough one for the Titans. Full squad available for the Panthers, you know, looking at the spine, Edwards, Luai, Cleary and Kenny. Luai and Kenny back into the team after, you know, missing out last week. That is big for them because they didn't look perfect last week in attack with the ball, but I'm sure they'll be fine this week. So again, the Titans need to do what they can to disrupt the Panthers with the forward pack. You know, they need to jam quickly because it worked out when we looked on the left-hand side attack for the Panthers on Cherry Evans' side defensively. When they jammed early, you know, Nathan Cleary didn't get a lot of time. Now that's going to be Jerome Luai instead on the left-hand side typically, and he does well to kind of get out of the way of those jams defensively when he has the ball or when he's receiving the ball. So the Titans, they really need to go at the Panthers this week. A lot of pace, a lot of intensity, go at them early in the tackle count, try and expose them like the Sea Eagles did last week, and maybe they'll have a chance. But for me, on paper, the Panthers are too professional, they're too strong in attack and defense that they won't allow the Titans to start building up steam. And any intensity that they do have, they'll knock out of them in about 10 minutes time. So with that being said, I'm going to go with the Panthers to win 13+. Next up, we have the St. George Illawarra Dragons versus the Melbourne Storm. Starting with the Dragons, they currently sit in 16th place on the ladder. They've won 1 in the last 5. Their home record is 5 wins and 5 losses. They also lost last time out against the Rabbitohs. This week, they'll be hosting from the Wynn Stadium in Wollongong. Looking at the squad that they've announced for this week, in the backs it includes Sloan, Feagai, Suli, Lomax, Ravalawa, Hamon and Hunt. In the forwards, it includes Francis Molo, Liddell, Laurie, Burns, Russell and Michael Molo. On the bench is Molaison, Ryan Couchman, Murdoch Masilla and Musgrove. Looking at percentage stats for the Dragons, it includes a 24% win rate, 75% completion rate and a tackle efficiency of 87.2%. Moving on to the Storm, they currently sit in 4th place on the ladder. They've won 3 in the last 5 and their away record is 5 wins and 5 losses. They also won last time out against the Raiders. Looking at the squad that they've announced for this week, in the backs, it includes Meaney, Remus Smith, Seve, Tonamaipia, Coates, Munster and Hughes. In the forwards, there's Kamakimitha, Grant, Welsh, Lioro, Katoa and King. On the bench is Garlic, Eisenhuth, Moroa and Asfa Solomona. Looking at percentage stats for the Storm, it includes a 62% win rate, 79% completion rate and a tackle efficiency of 86.9%. I'm just going to make it very clear now. I'm going to come out with a bold prediction here and say that the Dragons are not going to win this game. Bold, I know. But seriously, the Dragons are just not very good right now. And Melbourne Storm, they are a little bit up and down, granted. Now, if Melbourne Storm are playing against a team where there was a little bit more to them, say it was the Roosters, or the Titans or the Eels with Mitchell Moses, if it was one of those teams, because the Storm have been so up and down the last 5 weeks, like it's gone win, loss, win, loss, win, because they've been so up and down, maybe one of those teams could be due, a win and put another loss on the board for Melbourne Storm. But given it's the Dragons, they've won 1 in the last 5, and that was, I believe it was against the Tigers. Like, I see no world in which the Dragons win. The only way that you could look at it and create an argument in favour of the Dragons is that they've won 5, lost 5 at home, and Storm have won 5, lost 5 away. So they both have a 50% win rate at home and away. So one way that you can, or one narrative that you can put out there is that it's a 50-50 game. That's a narrative you could put out there. Statistically, that is a genuine narrative you can put out there. But in terms of the squads available on paper and how the Dragons have been, no. Maybe using that, you could go with a 1-12 margin, maybe, if you wanted to, because it 50-50 statistically, home to away for both teams. And Melbourne Storm have been so up and down the last couple of weeks that you could say, okay, well, maybe there's a 1-12 in there somewhere, and the Dragons are at home. Maybe home, playing at home is an advantage for them. But for me, Melbourne Storm need to get on that consistent win streak. A little bit like what I said with the Warriors about needing to put in statement wins, and they certainly did last week, but that needs to start being consistent now at this point, especially if they want to keep that top 4 spot. I think they've got a little bit of a gap to 5th place possibly, but if they want to keep it, not have that under question, and be a legitimate contender in the top 4, they've got to start putting in those consistent wins, and it's got to be another huge statement win this week for the Melbourne Storm. One other thing, he's not in the squad yet, but Ryan Papenhuyzen, I absolutely cannot wait for him to be back. I cannot wait. And then the official best spine in the NRL of Papenhuyzen, Munster, Hughes and Grant will be back in full force. I cannot wait for him to be back. I cannot wait. It's so fun to watch as a player. But right now, Nick Meaney's in the number 1 role, and I think he's reliable enough. He's doing a good enough job. It's not perfect, but it's a solid job week in, week out. So yeah, Melbourne Storm will be completely fine. Hopefully, because I'm going to predict them to win 13+. Next up, we have the Newcastle Knights versus the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Starting with the Knights, they currently sit in 7th place on the ladder. They've won 5 in the last 5, and their home record is 7 wins and 3 losses. They also won last time out against the Bulldogs. They'll be hosting from the McDonald Jones Stadium in Newcastle this week. Looking at the squad that they've announced so far, in the backs it includes Ponga, Young, Gagai, Best, Marju, Gamble and Hastings. In the forwards is Jacob Saifiti, Crosland, Thompson, Frizzell, Fitzgibbon and Elliott. On the bench it includes Mann, Daniel Saifiti, Hetherington and Croker. Looking at percentage stats for the Knights, it includes a 52% win rate, 75% completion rate and a tackle efficiency of 88%. Moving on to the Rabbitohs, they currently sit in 8th place on the ladder. They've won 2 in the last 5, and their away record is 8 wins and 3 losses. They also won last time out against the Dragons. Looking at the squad that they've announced so far for this week, in the backs includes Latrell Mitchell, Johnston, Tass, Graham, Milne, Walker and Ilias. In the forwards is Arrow, Cook, Shakai Mitchell, Kalamatangi, Host and Murray. On the bench is Duncan, Chikam, Havili and Mawale. Looking at percentage stats for the Rabbitohs, it includes a 55% win rate, 75% completion rate and a tackle efficiency of 87.8%. I have a feeling that this could be the game of the week, because these are two teams where, when the Rabbitohs are at their best, they are so fun to watch and so dangerous. They can rip teams apart, and defensively they can, they put up such stout efforts on the line, on their own line defensively. Sometimes it's so impressive, but it's just not been a good couple weeks. It's not been a good couple weeks. The Knights, however, have won 6 in a row, but they've won 5 in their last 5. Home record of 7 wins and 3 losses is fantastic. Obviously, the Rabbitohs coming into this game with a strong away record as well. I thought that, given the Knights were somewhat dodgy against the Dolphins, and I give a lot of credit to the Bulldogs actually, which I so regret. But I gave the Bulldogs a lot of credit for that game and thought it'd be a close one. I think I predicted 30-20 or 30-22, something like that. I thought the Knights would have a tough battle there, and they absolutely demolished them. And you look at that Bulldogs team on paper, that's a big win. Like, a lot of people just say, well, it's the Bulldogs. But if you look at the team that the Bulldogs had on paper last week, that is a huge win. That's an absolutely massive win. So, for me, I trust the Knights. I do trust the Knights. For me, the Rabbitohs are still a little bit too up and down. I can't trust them enough to win this one. I still think it's going to be a competitive game between both teams. I think there'll be a lot of tries scored. I think defensively, both these teams will be quite open, because in attack it'll be free flowing for both teams. I think a lot will be scored down the left hand side for the Rabbitohs, and I think it'll be shared quite evenly on right to left for the Knights. But I think the Knights, given their performances recently and the fact that I believe they have a full team available, their spine is so well balanced and they're playing just incredible right now. But I think the Rabbitohs, can still put in a strong shift. I'm going to have to go with the Knights to win 1-12 points. Finally, for this week, we have the Canberra Raiders versus the Canterbury Bulldogs. Starting with the Raiders, they currently sit in 6th place on the ladder. They've won 2 in the last 5. Their home record is 6 wins and 4 losses. They also lost last time out against the Melbourne Storm. This week, they'll be hosting from the GIO Stadium in Canberra. Looking at the squad that they've announced for this week, in the backs it includes Rapana, Hopwate, Croker, Timoko, Kotrich, Whiten and Fogarty. In the forwards it includes Papali'i, Wolford, Tarpany, Young, Whitehead and Horsburgh, and on the bench is Starling, Gula, Schiller and Mariota. Looking at percentage stats for the Raiders, they have a 57% win rate, 76% completion rate and a tackle efficiency of 87.9%. Moving on to the Bulldogs, they currently sit in 15th place on the ladder. They've won 2 in the last 5, and their away record is 3 wins and 7 losses. They also lost last time out against the Knights. Looking at the squad that they've announced for this week, it includes in the backs Avarillo, Wilson, Kiraz, Burns, Adokar, Burton and Sexton. In the forwards is King, Marnie, Knight, Kickout, Waddell and Sutton. On the bench is Flanagan, Thompson, Vitala Mariner and Panga Jr. Looking at percentage stats for the Bulldogs, they have a 33% win rate, 75% completion rate and a tackle efficiency of 86%. So last week, I essentially said that the Bulldogs would put in a good shift against the Knights. I thought that they'd make it competitive, given that the Bulldogs, I think the week before they beat the Dolphins, and the Knights the week after that struggled against the Dolphins, but they got it done eventually. I thought that the Bulldogs could put in a good shift against the Knights. Didn't happen. Just wasn't even close, really. I'm still going to ride that Bulldogs wave at the moment. That people are going to be thinking, well, what are you talking about? You've given us so many predictions so far. You were 8 out of 8 last week. Really, really smart. Well done. You make some good decisions. But what are you on about? Why are you giving the Bulldogs so much credit? And again, on paper, I know games aren't won on paper, I understand that, but the Bulldog squad on paper for me should be doing so much better than it has been. It's just Avarillo, Kiraz, Adokar, Burton, Sexton, King, Marnie, Knight, Kickout, Sutton, Pangai Jr. Quality players in there. They should be doing so much better than, especially what they did last week. Of course, credit to the Knights, but both of these teams, the Raiders and the Bulldogs, have been off. Both won 2 in the last 5. The Raiders, there was a point where, only a month or so ago, 5 out of 5 in form, and they were looking great. But I believe right now, in terms of points difference, goal difference, whatever you call it, the Raiders are the worst in the top 8. Minus 100 and something. They're the worst top 8 team right now. Just based on that. Of course, points, they're higher up, 6th, higher up than the Knights and the Rabbitohs. The Raiders, I really backed them to put in a strong shift against the Storm. I really did. I knew the Storm were a better team, but I did not expect the Raiders to be dominated so much. But for me, I'm still gonna lean towards the Raiders, but I'm gonna continue to give the Bulldogs a little bit of faith and credit based on the team that they've got on paper. So I don't think it's gonna be a close game. The gap will still be obvious. I don't think 13 plus is the go-to here. Although, if you did go with Raiders 13 plus, I wouldn't hold it against you. I could completely. If you went with the Raiders to win by 24 here, I would completely understand. I'd absolutely understand. I'd even say, go for it. I don't know what I'm talking about. Go for it. Raiders to win by 30. Go for it. But the Raiders have been shaky. The Bulldogs have been shaky, but it's less concerning for the Bulldogs because they've already been poor most of the season, whereas the Raiders are falling down. How they're still as high as 6th with the form that they've shown the last few weeks is, I mean, credit to the opening half of the season for them, of course, but they are on thin ice at the moment. The Raiders are on thin ice, and a loss to the Bulldogs is just an absolute no-go. You cannot let this happen. You are fighting for your life at this point because there are so many teams ready to chase you. The Raiders cannot afford a loss here. They don't need to care too much about goal difference, but they have to win this one. They have to. But I think the Bulldogs... Sometimes the Bulldogs, after a big loss, they kind of turn it around the week after and they put in a good effort. Like, that's kind of been typical of them the last 2 seasons, I'd say. I don't think there's enough in that Bulldogs team to win because the Raiders are still fine. But the Raiders, as I said before, you could easily predict the Raiders to batter the Bulldogs, but equally, I could also see the Bulldogs coming up with an upset because it's such a Bulldogs thing to happen, and the Raiders have been as shaky as they have been in the last 5 for their standard. But with all that being combined, finally coming up with a prediction, with all that combined, I'm going to go with the Raiders to win 1 to 12 points. So to recap my round 25 predictions, I've gone with the Cowboys 1 to 12, Warriors and Roosters 13 plus, I've gone with the Tigers 1 to 12, Panthers and Storm 13 plus, and the Knights and Raiders both 1 to 12. In terms of winners confidence, I'm at about 85%. In terms of margin confidence, 50%. A lot of these for me are very much 50-50 games. In terms of the winner's confidence, last week it was 95%. 85% I think is very likely. I still trust the Cowboys to beat the Sharks, but I think there's a potential upset there. I still think the Tigers can beat the Dolphins, but it's so understandable if the Dolphins win. I think the Knights can beat the Rabbitohs, but it is, of course, so understandable if the Rabbitohs beat the Knights. So there's a few in there that are real close challenges. And I've backed the Tigers, so that kind of could throw another perfect week out the window. But 50% margin confidence, I don't know. It's always up and down. I got the 8 winners last week, but only 1 margin correct. So it's all over the place at the moment. But yeah, that's my recap for round 25. So that's going to be it for this video. If you have any predictions for this week, let me know in the comments down below. Also, let me know how you got on last week as well. Again, if you would like to check out any hoodies and support the channel, you can check the KL store link in the description down below. And anyone that does purchase anything, thank you so much. It is a huge help and supports the channel greatly. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.